Chapter 26. Ayianna blinked at the hazy images surrounding her. Dingy canvas stretched up and created a low ceiling. Where was she? She turned her head, but pain speared her neck and sizzled down her spine. Its heat chased away the numbing cold from her limbs. Waves of spasms to her muscles. She held her breath and waited for them to subside. Why did her body ache so terribly? She took a deep breath and tried to sit up, but the room spun and her muscles screamed. She fell back. What was wrong with her? She couldn't remember ever feeling so sore. "Good morning, Ayianna." A woman's angular face blurred into view. Where her eyebrows should have been, a ridge of flesh dipped between large oval eyes the color of murky seawater. An inscription darkened the woman's high cheekbones and 3 faint slits slashed her neck. She had seen the inscription before, but where? The strange woman moved closer. White braids spilled over the edge of her head and tickled Ayianna's cheek. She touched Ayianna's forehead. Her fingertips were cool but comforting. "Who are you?" Ayianna tried to prop herself up again, but a tremor rippled through her body and she lay back down. "Be still, young one." The strange woman massaged her arm. "My name is Nerissa, and I am a Kaliki from Ganya." "Oh, you're a mermaid," Ayianna said. The ridged face made sense now. She peered over the side of the cot. "Do you really have a green tail?" "I'm a bit old to be referred to as a mermaid." She scooped up a blanket from a wooden stool and folded it. Her face remained somber and unreadable. Aside from the white hair, the merwoman's appearance bore no sign of old age. "And yes, I do have a tail, but it is black and only forms when I am submerged in water." She sighed. It was a beautiful sound, like that of a gentle, welcoming rain. Kaleki cannot go long without their beloved waters. Ayianna shifted in the cot. Had she offended her? She turned away and tried scanning the room from her position. A handful of scrolls littered a corner of the canvas tent, opposite of a large bag and a broadsword in its sheath. A fear sliced through her daze. She gripped the edges of her blanket. "Am I dead?" "No, but you have been very sick." "Where is everyone? Are they all right?" She tried to sit up again, but her vision swirled and she pitched forward. Nerissa caught her by the arm. "What happened? Why am I here?" "Your questions will be answered soon enough." Nerissa stuffed the folded blanket and pillow behind Ayianna. "Your friends are fine, but right now you must eat and regain your strength. A bit of breakfast will settle your hunger, but not upset your stomach." She picked up a bowl from the floor and handed it to Ayianna. She peered at the contents. Cold, lumpy porridge never looked so good. Nerissa sat across from her and pulled out a blue velvet bag. "We must discuss your wound." "Wound?" Ayianna asked through a mouthful of porridge. "You are fortunate Darren found you when he did. You had an encounter with a Harpy lord, which has left you with an incurable injury." Ayianna reached up and felt her neck. Her fingers rubbed across 2 puncture wounds. A ripple of pain shot through her spine and she jerked her hand back. "The pain will eventually subside, but the scarred flesh will remain sensitive. However, you must keep the wound cleaned and administer the contents of this vial once every 3 months or so." She slipped a crystal bottle from the velvet pouch and held it up. Ayianna's eyes shifted from the small bottle to the pearly scales covering the merwoman's arm. She tore her gazes away and drank more of the porridge. "The Kulin Mekoa is the sacred water for my home," Nerissa explained. "Merfolk need it to live, and a drop of it will heal most anything. Your wound, however, will never heal completely." The last gulp of porridge caught in Ayianna's throat and she began coughing. Nerissa handed her a cup of water and Ayianna washed the rest of the porridge down. She took another drink to ensure the fit of coughs had finally dissipated. Finding her voice again, she asked, "What do you mean?" "The venom that entered your bloodstream is cursed. I was able to stop it from destroying your body. Nevertheless, damage remains. The wound will seep, infections are inevitable, and there's a chance the Kulin only slowed the poison rather than eradicating it from your body. making you vulnerable to. Nerissa trailed off as her pale green eyes averted for a second. You could still be vulnerable. Are you saying that this venom could still be in my body? And that it could still kill me? Or worse. Concern flickered across Nerissa's large eyes. Ayianna raised her eyebrows. What could be worse than death? Harpies are dreadful creatures, an abomination. She clasped her hands and rested them in her lap. You could become one. The words slammed into Ayianna. She tried to make sense out of them, but the words washed over her and away, unable to penetrate her muddled mind. But if you do as I said, 1 dose every 3 months, you will be fine. For the rest of my life? Nerissa nodded. Ayianna stared at the empty bowl. What had happened? How did she end here, cursed for the rest of her life? The merwoman said something about preparations, took the bowl, and left. Ayianna laid on her side, pulled her knees to her chest, feeling cold and exposed. She tried to remember the last couple of days. Slowly images of fairies battling hamadryads shifted through her thoughts. She had escaped, only to find herself trapped in the horrible underground tunnels. A shadowy memory of an eerie, empty Ngandu slipped past her mind like a slippery fish. What had happened? She closed her eyes. Cursed! For the rest of my life! Her stomach churned and threatened to eject its newly eaten contents. What would her mother say? Desmond! Would he still want her? Could she add it to all the other secrets she was supposed to keep from him and live a double life just like her father had done and expected her to do? Tears burned behind her eyelids. Ayianna? A male's voice disrupted the flood of anguish drowning her. She swallowed the knot in her throat and looked up. An old elf pushed through the tense opening, his bronze face full of wrinkles and concern. He looked like a kind grandfather with his white beard and receding hairline, and like Nerissa, his cheekbones bore an inscription that seemed to have blurred with time. Then she remembered. He was Saeed, the High Guardian. But how did she know him? Never Nerissa told me you had awakened. He sat down on the stool. His golden eyes bore into hers and never once strayed from her face. Still, she couldn't help but feel he was staring at her neck. He must know the horror that she had become. We've made it to Remosia, then? She managed to ask. Yes. Ayianna sighed. She should have been relieved, but the emerging despair overwhelmed her. They had reached the Guardians, but why did they come here again? Slowly, the shattered memories of recent events came together. The death of her father and brother, the escape from Badera, getting lost in the old forest of Ingano. The image of her mother's stricken face and silent pleas resurfaced. Ayianna bolted upright, but immediately wished she hadn't. A searing pain shot through her head and the room spun. Saeed clutched her elbow and repositioned the blanket and pillow. Calm yourself. You will have to move slowly until your body fully recovers. Ayianna nodded and leaned back. Did Kale tell you we found my mother? We saw her, many other people locked in chains. We must return and rescue them. Saeed shook his head. He told me, but she is not physically there. A sorceress has bound the souls of the plains people, your mother included. We have determined to send a delegation to Bonzapur to find a tonic that will free them. But then, where is she? We will do what we can to find her, but we need the tonic. You must help Kale find it. Kale doesn't need my help. Besides, I'm not going to run all over Nalu while my father's dead body rots in the woods without a proper burial. His body is no longer there. What? We looked, but did not find him. She blinked back tears. No peace in life or in death. He leaned forward, placing his elbows on his knees, his eyes filled with tenderness. We know what your father was hiding. If you can remember anything he told you about the secret he was keeping, you must tell me. It might help us find your mother. Ayianna stared at the old elf sitting in front of her, wishing she'd wake up any minute and find herself someplace else. She nodded. She closed her eyes and forced herself to remember the last time she saw her father alive. The trees had been clothed in their autumn splendor. She and her father walked along the trail, discussing their future, her future. Then the men ambushed them. Her father fought valiantly against so many. Then his crushing weight fell upon her as he took the sword that had been meant for her. Ayianna glanced up at Saeed through her tears. He reached for her hand and held it firmly. His calloused hands were warm and comforting. She brushed away the tears and took a deep breath. He said, "To tell my brother the sun has set and that the morning star is forever locked in stone." "Daughter of Arlen, you have strength and courage in your blood. Thank you." "But what does it mean?" "I must think upon it. Perhaps in time the meaning will become clear." He patted her hand and stood. "I am certain the others are anxious to see you, now that you are awake." He turned to leave. "Wait, what secret was my father guarding? What were those men looking for?" Saeed tugged at his braided beard and studied her. She twisted the wool blanket in her hands. Its rough fibers bit into her skin. The silence lengthened, and he still didn't respond. What if he wouldn't tell her? She gritted her teeth. "There have been too many secrets. I have the right to know." He studied her and then slowly nodded. "You are right. For whether you knew it or not, your life has been and still is in danger. The men seek a dagger. I am assuming your father hid it, otherwise they would have found it already." She frowned. "A dagger? Anyone can buy one for a handful of dalakis." "This dagger was a tool created by Teysa to connect mortals to immortality, but at a very high cost." He tugged on his beard and nodded to himself. He raised his bushy eyebrows. "It would be best if you did not mention this to anyone." She nodded as a chill ran down her spine. "Do you think they're still looking for me?" "Perhaps." He hesitated. "I am certain they have your mother, and if she is not cooperative, they might think to use you to persuade her to reveal its whereabouts." She stared at him. How did her world fall into such chaos? Saeed disappeared through the tent's opening. Its flaps settled back in their place, closing her off from the rest of the world. Ayianna exhaled. A fresh wave of tears spilled down her cheeks, and she quickly wiped them away. She clenched her trembling hands together. She had to stop crying. Desmond would be here soon. What would she tell him? Maybe he already knew. "Ayianna!" exclaimed a booming voice. Her heart jumped into her throat as Desmond blew through the opening, carrying with him the chill of late autumn. His long strides covered the distance quickly. Dirty blonde curls hung past his bristly chin, nearly reaching his shoulders. He grasped her hands, but his eyes strayed to her neck. Shame engulfed her. How much did he know? Would he still accept her? "Come on, Desmond." Veen suddenly appeared behind him and pushed him out of the way. He clasped her in a hug. "We were worried about you," he pulled away. "You wouldn't believe what we had to go through to rescue you. There were these trolls and harpies and this—" Desmond elbowed Veen in the ribs. "We're just thankful you're better." "How are you feeling?" Cale stood at the entrance, his bow and quiver already strapped across his back. His left hand fidgeted with the hilt of his sword. "As well as I can be," Ayianna forced a smile. She didn't want to sound ungrateful. "Thank you, all of you, for saving me." She glanced back at Desmond. He squeezed her hand. She'd tell him about the wound later. No one else needed to know. "Saeed tells me we need to find a tonic." Desmond's face crumpled into a scowl. "The old bird seems to think we need to help the half-breed, the prince included." "Desmond," Cale's eyes narrowed, "you should show the proper respect for the High Guardian." Desmond straightened. "He is old, isn't he? There's no disrespect in speaking the truth, is there?" Cale clenched his jaw. "We leave for Nadari the evening after next." With that he turned and disappeared through the tent's opening. "I guess the gods have blessed us with more time to harass the half-breed," Desmond chuckled. "Go easy on him." Veen rapped his knuckle against Desmond's shoulder. He might be a bit stodgy, but he's on our side." Desmond's eyebrows shot up. "Don't tell me you're taking a liking to him. What would your father say if he heard you talking like that about half-breeds?" "Now, gentlemen," Nerissa said as she re-entered the tent, "Ayianna needs to rest, especially if Cale insists you will leave so soon." "Right." Desmond turned to Ayianna and gave her hand one last squeeze. "We'll see you later." Once the men had left, Nerissa placed a conch shell and the blue velvet bag containing the vial of Kulan Mekoa in Ayanna's hands. "If you travel as far as the Mekoa Sea, my horn shall bring you aid. There you may refill the vial when the Kulan begins to diminish. And there is one more surprise I think you shall like." Nerissa reopened the tent's flaps, and a large blur of grey fur leapt into the air. "Liam!" Ayianna grabbed the wolf's neck. "How?" "Eloith took care of her." Tears slid down Ayanna's cheeks as she buried her face into Liam's fur.